Water crisis. Even in these days, 25,000 people will have died due to contaminated water. Most famines are water-related disasters. About 2 billion people worldwide are threatened by contaminated water or drought. Good evening, dear viewers. Welcome to this new time jump show. Now, on the topic, water crisis, the origin of a new water policy. It is about our most important food. Water is a global problem, but in today's time jump show, we are going to limit ourselves to discuss Germany. Even in the water-rich Federal Republic, can the water emergency be more accurately calculated than the climate catastrophe? Water is being wasted, polluted, or even poisoned. We consume per capita about 8 times as much water as our grandparents. The short time that remains is as precious as the water itself. Our guests in this show are the Berlin Senator for Urban Development and Environmental Protection, Dr. Volker Hassenmeier, and Dr. Thomas Kluge, water expert from Frankfurt. Mr. Kluge, what could we do to overcome the water crisis? Before we might be talking about taking any measures, let us say something about the causes of the crisis. It's because the availability of water as a resource is limited. It cannot be multiplied, and the world's vast freshwater resources are being increasingly destroyed by industrial pollution, and therein lies the real cause of the crisis. And the water crisis is the real crisis of the 21st century. Benzene, xylene, toluene. Every day, 230 tons of poisonous chemicals from chemical and paper plants flow into the river Rhine. 100 million liters of water a day is evaporated from any of the cooling towers, and in order to protect our power plants against corrosion, water is enriched with chemicals and heavy metals, and then returned to rivers. Chlorine, paper whitening agent. Cellulose plants waste contaminates rivers and seas. We are systematically poisoning our water treasure and destroying forest and lake life. Fertilizers, herbicides, insecticides. Farmers poison water as well. Nitrates and ammonia penetrate soil and are transported by wind to spread over forests and seas. Germany is an area of contaminated water. Industry and farming poison its whole region. Germany is an area of contaminated water. Industry and farming poison its whole regions. Whatever is poured into rivers ends up in the final storage, the sea. The content of nitrate in the upper layers of groundwater has increased 4 times during the last 60 years. Göttingen University researchers have checked water quality in 2,100 flats in Berlin. Children are particularly susceptible to absorbing lead. This may result in speech and concentration disorders. Scientists suggest changing the pipelines in every household where children or pregnant women live. Water is the most important food product. Laws concerning drinking water should protect it. Because nobody respects these laws, Barbara IV has become incurably ill. She used to drink tap water for years, not suspecting anything. Neither her landlord nor the authorities warned her. Being a trustful citizen, she counted on the laws and regulations. Now, she feels deceived. 165 micrograms of lead per litre were found in Barbara IV's household water, despite the fact that there should be no more than 40. 4 times the norm. But apparently, nobody's interested. The result? Lead has been damaging Barbara's organism for years. It has damaged her nervous system and her joints, and holes in her bones are getting bigger and bigger. The high poison concentration level is despite the law. A single case? We are talking and testing water samples from 30 households in Hamburg. Our main interest is families with children, because for them, lead is especially dangerous. A renowned institute in Kiel is testing the samples. A horrifying result: 1/3 of them is bad. I would strongly advise not to include this water, which has contamination level 3 times higher than the norm states, into these people's children's nutrition process. Water contaminated in lead pipes is a huge problem. Health Service assesses that 10 million of people are forced to drink water with the high level of lead. How is it possible that the levels set by the law can be so greatly exceeded? We have found out that the law is the key to the problem. You can read it in black and white in German Bundestag. Changing the pipes in the whole country would cost at least 6.5 billion Deutschmarks, and the lion's share would have to be paid by local housing associations, what means by the state and district authorities. It's too much. When it comes to money, health is just not important anymore. It's not only about lead in drinking water. It is also related to copper. For over 10 years now, it's been obvious that water coming from copper pipes is dangerous to infants. But most of the parents just don't know about it. John's mother didn't know that either. John is 4 years old now, and she used to prepare his baby food using tap water. John almost died. It's been 16 years since the first death case. The law for drinking water still doesn't include a border level for copper content. There's only this directive, which isn't considered as a law. But that's not all. Even this directive is too high, according to experts. 3 milligrams per litre should be considered as a lethal dose. Along with heavy metals, there are some medical remains in water that are still active. Artificial hormones are the biggest problem. These chemical substances regulate growth and sexuality. It turns out that even by purifying our water, we are unable to get rid of them completely. Measurements showed that as little as 5 milligrams per litre of water caused changes in fish. This level has been exceeded thousands of times in German purification plants. It seems to me that we can only see the top of the iceberg, and I think that this debate on the hormonal scandal is the living proof of that. As a consumer and endocrinologist, I'm worried when I listen to things like that, because I'm under the impression here that if we looked closer into this matter, we would find many safety problems in other areas too. What is the influence of this hormonal cocktail on people? The researchers who come from the highly industrialized countries found a significant drop in the male fertility. We take a medicine and it works inside our body. But then it is excreted and goes to a sanitation plant. And that is how these chemically active substances end up in our rivers. Many towns use this water again by using wells or water intakes located nearby rivers. And if the water contains drugs, we can only hope they are removed later during purification process. But unfortunately, 10 years ago, when they started looking for the remains of drugs in drinking water, they actually found them. A medicine which decreases blood lipid concentration got into drinking water in several cities. During the next few years, a real cocktail of various drugs was found in drinking water. For example, coughing remedies, drugs for epilepsy, psychoactive drugs, hormones and antibiotics. Remains of drugs were found even deep underground, in groundwater. Especially a drug called carbamazepine, a medicine for epilepsy. Right now, there are about 80,000 drugs circulating in the market. It is of course extremely difficult to find a proper test for each one of them. It is a huge gap in our law indeed. This way, it is virtually impossible to protect our drinking water properly, because the detected biologically active substances have been in circulations for a very long time now, and may remain there because no research has been done so far. Regardless of how unfriendly a drug is to the natural environment, it keeps circulating. But nowadays, this most important food product contains bacteria resistant to antibiotics. This kind of bacteria live under some kind of protection in our pipelines. They create a sort of biological layer on the inner walls of the pipes, dense habitats which are packed with various bacteria. The scientists from Karlsruhe found immunological genes on metal plates which are part of these special pipes. These genes protect bacteria against antibiotics. It is a problem because in case of infection, the prescribed antibiotic is ineffective. Germs are reproduced continuously because they have this particular gene. It was obvious that we would find immunological genes, which are immunological bacteria in sewage systems like, for example, hospital sewages and purification complexes. We didn't expect to find them in drinking water. It was new and surprising. They often live in a sort of small rings, and these gene rings are passed among bacteria, and not only within one family, but also to another, different types of bacteria. In this way, the immunological genes are introduced into spores, which have no contact with antibiotics whatsoever. Nevertheless, many antibiotics do not decompose in purification plants, and in their unchanged form, they get into rivers, along with immunological genes, which are passed on to water bacteria. It is impossible to find what will be later in the environment. This way, bacteria may return to people with their drinking water, and the result will probably be dreadful. Harmless so far, water bacteria pass this immunity to antibiotics to normal human bacteria. Immunity to antibiotics which would be prescribed to you when you got sick. And the antibiotics wouldn't work then, and that would be a real infectional disaster. Cold, pure, cold. A glass of cold water, carbonated water. Currently, there are over 500 kinds of water, both cheap and expensive, available on the market. But are those expensive ones better? And in result, healthier? Makers of this program want to know the truth. In order to do it, we brought to the laboratory 5 bottles of carbonated water. What's inside? Sometimes the result cause pure fear. What can we find there? For the experts from the Union Farming Research Institute, just a few drops are enough to detect any problematic substances. We had the water tested for 17 different compounds. Professor Ewald Schnug is a water expert. He has examined 600 kinds of it. In case of 3 samples we delivered, he found some interesting properties. In Apollinari's brand, he found particularly large amount of semi-metallic boron, 1,135 micrograms per liter, to be exact. Although regulations regarding mineral waters allow up to 5 times more, what's strange, in case of drinking water, only 1,000 micrograms per liter are allowed. The norm is more stringent. During animal testing phase, rats were given water which contained particularly big amounts of boron. It had a negative influence on their fertility. In answer to that, a Apollinaris company indicated that it was impossible to remove boron from mineral water, and then they keep up to all the legal regulations. Professor Schnug's research team discovered something more. Uranium in 2 of the samples, almost 3 micrograms in the cheap Saskia Quelle Riesling, and over twice more, 7.6 micrograms, in the expensive San Pellegrino. All of this legal, because regulations which regard mineral water do not contain any norms for uranium, just as this substance didn't exist. Uranium occurs naturally in the ground, but the experts are warning us. Uranium is doubly dangerous. It is poisonous and radioactive. What's more, it accumulates within an organism with time. Consumers advise us as follows: ingest as little uranium as possible. In order to keep to this advice, there should be information about uranium content put on the bottle. We informed the manufacturers about the uranium content. They do not consider it necessary to give the information on the bottles. We don't consider it necessary to inform people about the uranium content in our water, said the manufacturer of San Pellegrino brand. Lidl Network isn't going to give the information about the uranium content without the valid regulations either. Those organizing the extra program provided the Freiburg Medicine and Hygiene Institute with hundreds of bottles of drinking water to be tested. In a dozen or so cases, potential pathogenic germs were found. Potential pathogenic germs. It's that if a man with his immunological system weakened drank this kind of water for a longer period of time, for example, a quarter of a liter a day, that might in some cases lead to a serious, sometimes even life-threatening infection. Under a threat of 5 million Deutschmarks fine, the State Court of Köln forbade RTL to state a beverage-producing company's name in this movie. The court took under consideration the main argument used by the producers. Because all the bottling plants stick to the laws concerning water, there is no way to press any charges. According to the order concerning mineral water, these beverages have to be tested by the producer within 12 hours since their bottling. A month may pass before these bottles get to consumers. During this period, nobody checks whether the pathogenic germs are reproduced or not. First things first, mineral water is not necessarily better than normal tap water. Concentration norms for substances like nitrates, pesticides or arsenic are even lower. Well, for example, tap water is sold as expensive mineral water like in England Dasani brand, produced by Coca-Cola. You must have heard about that scandal. Bismarck Quelle in Hamburg, Aumühle. Here, water comes from the same groundwater pipeline from which the Hamburg Linde waterworks get their drinking water. Here's what the speaker of the BUND has to say about the general relation between drinking and mineral water quality. There is no scientific evidence to prove that mineral water is healthier than tap water. The legislators clearly state that both kinds of water are deprived of or enriched with the same substances. So we get the same product no matter whether we turn on the tap or open a bottle of mineral water. Tap drinking water goes to Ellen's bottle every morning. Her mother believes in the best control of the foodstuffs. The water is contaminated anyway, contaminated with lead. It comes directly from the pipes. The makers of Plus Minus performed a test. They bought 15 randomly chosen fittings, taken mostly from building materials supermarkets. This is where every third tap is bought. Among them, we have some real bargains for not more than €12.99. The makers of Plus Minus gave the fittings to the certified laboratory for environmental protection. The focus of their interest is water which remains in the fittings for 12 or more hours during night. How much lead will there be in such water? It's amazing, but all of the tested fittings showed at least traces of lead in water. Some of them showed increased level of lead concentration, and in one case, the level was so high, it scared us. Tap lead. 13 out of 15 samples contained more lead than it is allowed by drinking water regulations, which is 25 micrograms per liter, even up to 280 times more. The high level of lead concentration can cause morphology disorders, renal dysfunction, and central nervous system disorders. It applies both to adults as well as children, but children are especially exposed because they have stronger ability to accumulate lead, more or less 5 times stronger than adults. Therefore, they ingest lead more intensively. It also applies to pregnant women. The makers of Plus Minus ask why nobody has given it any attention. After all, the Union Environmental Protection Office measures the lead concentrations level in fittings water. But this office does it in a very particular way. First, the controllers drain the whole 80 liters. The tap is sealed for only 4 hours. Then, the water remaining in the fitting sample is taken. Result? The requirements are met. We think it's not true, because taps are used in a different way. In the evening, Ellen drinks her tea, but nobody uses the tap during night. So let's seal it once again, this time for the whole night, for 11 hours. How much lead will there be in the water in the morning? The second test showed that lead concentration level was increased up to 26 micrograms per liter, which means that the standard for drinking water was exceeded. But how come that there is lead in our taps? And first of all, where is it stored? We show the fittings to a specialist. We give them to be tested by Klaus Schröder, a certified professional plumber. And it is him who tells us that lead is what the fittings manufacturers need. Lead makes the fittings easier to shape, but it gets from the casing into the water. And in what way our plumber, Mr. Schröder, protects his clients from lead in water? I protect my clients by buying the fittings only in professional hardware lots. That is where you get all the necessary certificates, because they say only renowned products. Safe in a professional outlet. We want to check it too, and that is exactly where we buy an expensive fittings set. But laboratory tests show traces of lead in these fittings too, and its content is similar to the one found in cheap models. Certificate, our last hope. It is voluntarily, and only few of the taps have the safety certificate. Our certification sign guarantees that the maximum lead concentration in fittings is not exceeded. It means that the consumer can be sure that the drinking water regulations requirements are met, and that he or she can drink water coming from the fittings without any risk involved. Not true. We deliver the certified fittings to the laboratory. The results are a bit of a cold shower. Despite the certificate, the water still contains lead. How is it possible? Simple. Inspectors rely on data provided by the manufacturer. This attachment on the faucet in your bathroom has to make water soft. These tiny parts are called tap aerators or water nozzles. There is air being mixed up with water using many different sieves and nozzles. It doesn't really matter how it works. The important thing is what comes out – water. If we take a look at this attachment here, pretty much used and calcified, the question should be allowed: do you suppose this water complies with our German water quality rules?
Dass dieses Wasser hier noch unseren deutschen Trinkwasserqualitätsregeln entspricht?
Nothing wrong has been found so far. After all, the water companies regularly check their quality of drinking water. But there is a catch. This woman will show you how samples are usually taken. Only the mixing nozzle is unscrewed and then flame the faucet. After that, the germ count in drinking water is examined. But who asks about how many germs remain in the mixing nozzle? But they are able to contaminate water. This is K. Detlef Berg, an expert in microbiology from BestWater, specialized on water analysis. He shall examine our 10 samples. May mixing nozzles actually contaminate drinking water? Experts say it's at least conceivable. The problem with the mixing nozzles is actually their large surface because of the web, plastic parts, grid on which a biofilm of bacteria grows and then can be released into the water at varying rate.
Und wenn die Keime rausgespült
And once the germs are released, we really have a problem. The other problem are where germs can possibly get on hands or food in the kitchen and then breed, in worst cases, even causing eating disorders such as diarrhea or vomiting.
Zum Beispiel durch Pseudomonaden führen können, also auch zu Durchfall oder Erbrechen im Extremfall.
According to the drinking water regulations, there are only 100 bacteria in 1 milliliter of drinking water allowed.
Dr. Berg und Rosemarie Falkenberg finden viel mehr. Und zwar zuerst in den Mischdüsen.
We have 10 mixing nozzles tested for bacteria content and tried to find those in which bacteria are. Therefore, there were 4 out of 10 with over 1 million bacteria. That's extremely high contamination compared to the others. It's the same in my sample. There are, for example, 5 million germs. This valve has astonished me. So this is quite new to me. That's so contaminated. It has taken only a couple of weeks for the biofilms to grow, even though their ability to release into water is variable. There are 6 million germs. Petra Flotter was not so lucky. Over 6 million germs were found in the mixing nozzle. And instead of allowed 100, there are, believe it or not, 368,000 bacteria. So many germs you have on your hand, only after once washing your hands. It's mad. You will not believe. It should indeed be pure water. I wouldn't prepare my salad with it. No, I really wouldn't, much as I'd like to. In the mixing nozzle of Mrs. Witt, something also has been found. Over 535,000 germs at the nozzle and at least 9,760 germs in the water. And why does this surprise you? So, normally, I would assume that this water is examined and they would always inform me, I think. So I'm really surprised germ counts in here are all that high. But since the terrorist attacks in the United States, the experts have been worried about the #1 food product's safety. We have to assume that now it is impossible to rule out the possibility of biological weapons attack. Several weeks ago we looked at it from a completely different perspective. But today we already know how well organized these attacks are. City waterworks control their water all the time. Its pressure, the pumps, the work stands. According to nowadays technical regulations, German waterworks are guarded more poorly than underground parking lots. Their employees very rarely perform microbiological tests by themselves. Many of the waterworks just send their samples to private laboratories. Laboratories like this one, Umweltkontroll Dessau. Smaller waterworks are microbiologically tested once a week. Big cities, once a day. The law concerning drinking water only settles the matter of testing spore cells in 20 and 36 degrees centigrade temperature. Other tests are not described, so they are not performed. Can dangerous substances pass through? Yes, they can. This is how it looks like. The Ruhr is a beautiful small river, but its load of environmental toxins is what has messed up the waterworks balance sheet for the last 2 years. Since then, they have grappled with pollutants such as PFC, perfluorinated compounds, or drag residues. This causes a permanent debate. The debate never ends, because these pollutants, no matter what concentration is found, even though if it's much slower, will always remain a public issue, a political problem, and an issue for the mass media. You can go out of the way of the problem with the public by making waterworks work actively. That means making investments to filter out the contaminants, or first at least to reduce them significantly. On the other hand, you would have high costs. The lower the concentration of pollutants to be removed from water, the higher the costs, while their increase is exponential. And the question is, will the public, will the water consumer pay these costs, and what sense would it make paying this money? It could benefit the health. Finally, you cannot even tell the long-term impact of some poisons. There are not even legal values for them. So the installation of filtering is obviously expensive, but how much would consumers have to pay for drinking water remains unclear. What solution remains then? If you are generally interested in health in your body, your life, or if you are ill or chronically ill, if you want to go to the doctors, if you've already visited 200 physicians and 100 people who practice unconventional medicine and you still didn't achieve anything, we will tell you what your first step should be to fight any disease. This very first step. It has to be the proper one. If you don't do it, the rest will give you nothing. Using drugs won't do anything. It's not about what your physician will prescribe you, because it's not about academic degrees. And this first step is called water. Water. A famous physician once said, "You're not ill, you're thirsty. Your body yearns for water. This is the cause of all your complaints and pains. You are not ill, you are thirsty." A flower is the example you know the best. If it's thirsty, it bows, hunches, and when it's given water, it stands upright. Flowers and plants are our oldest siblings and function exactly the same way. You're not ill. Maybe you are thirsty. People die of heart attacks, strokes, or vein diseases. When chlorinating water was introduced in the USA, the incidence of venous infections increased by 500%. French scientist Vincent for many years had conducted research which showed that death rate increases along with deterioration of the water. Headaches, problems with focusing one's attention, memory losses, fatigue and exhaustion. These are all related to water shortage in your body. Men have been poisoning the air they breathe, contaminating the water they drink, and the soil that feeds them, and in doing so, they have created harsh and unwelcoming environment they are not used to. Best scientists start to talk. The natural environment has never been safe, but the biggest threats to the environment have appeared during the last 50 years. I'm talking about careless chemicals abuse, especially those oil-based. There are about 6.5 million synthetic substances now, and our bodies are not capable of dealing with most of them. Nevertheless, 1 million new ones is added to the list every year. This is a huge number of chemicals which we introduce to the environment. Of course, most of them are created on purpose, but we still don't know the effects they may have on our bodies. These are new, completely unknown substances. Lots of them may cause damages, even on cellular level. Between 1960 and the year 2000, the Earth's populations doubled. There are 4 times more people now than at the beginning of the previous century. And the results affecting our environment are dreadful. Diseases eating through our society are getting stronger every day. And it's only because of the ruthlessness of the industry, particularly the oil industry. Its influence on world's authorities is so powerful that nobody says nothing about this very real danger, and probably nobody will mention it in the future.
Dass über die wahren Risiken niemand spricht und auch nie jemand sprechen wird.
The Environment Preservation Agency announced that nowadays 90% of Earth's water is contaminated with farming and industrial wastes. What is the price of this contamination? For example, cancer. Cancer. The fact that 1 out of every 2 men and 1 out of every 3 women will experience cancer-related illnesses should make us aware that we are rushing towards a real cancer epidemic. This diagram pictures a rapid increase of incidence in the last 40 years. If 1 out of 2 men will have cancer, then if you think about it, you will reach the conclusion that this is already everybody's problem. Practically everybody will go down with cancer.
In which 1 in every man will get cancer in their lifetime.